Okay, well, why don't we get started? I'm sure a few other people will continue to join here today, um, but we'll get started. And as people join, I'm sure they won't miss. They'll just miss my introduction here, so won't be a problem. Thanks everybody for joining us today. The webinar that we're going to be presenting is financial planning for a child with complex needs. We have a wonderful expert speaker today, Jeff Zaldin, who's joining us, CEO at Special Needs Financial, and with lived experience himself, raising a daughter with complex needs as well. Our plan for today is we're just going to do a little bit of welcome and thanks, and again, just give some more people a chance to join. The presentation is going to run about 50 minutes, and we're going to be integrating question and answer into that. So as we go through the presentation, if you do have any questions, please don't be shy to put them into the chat or the questions, the Q&A function inside of Zoom. And we'll interrupt the webinar and read out the questions and get responses from Jeff as we go here. I do want to just highlight that Jeff's particular expertise is in Canadian financial planning. So I know that we do have a few registrants from the US and elsewhere. So just a heads up, guys, we don't want to take your time if we don't need to. So this is going to be focused on Canada. And even more specifically, our registrants seem to be from a few different provinces: BC, Quebec, Ontario, New Brunswick, and Alberta. So we're going to be trying to focus on those. And if there are any questions about other provinces within Canada and specific financial planning for someone with complex needs in those areas, we do have that information. We just weren't planning to present it today because we didn't see any registrants for it, but we're happy to answer those questions or put anyone in touch with someone who can help coordinate that information. And once the presentation wraps up, we'll just throw some contact information up and say thanks again. And we'll wrap it up from there. So, Avika is a producer of free online educational content for people living with complex needs and those who care for them. We couldn't do our work without wonderful sponsors, and we want to say thank you to our sponsors, Control Bionics, who have given us an opportunity to deliver this web series of content for parents of children with complex needs. So thank you so much to Control Bionics who allow us to do the work that we do. We're going to try to find an opportunity a little bit later in the presentation to run just a quick clip about their technology. So please, pay attention, stay tuned for that. But without too much further ado, and I'm sure Jeff can speak a little bit better to himself and his background. But like I said, he's the CEO and founder of Special Needs Financial. It sounds like this is a wonderful financial financial planning firm that specializes in financial planning for those with complex needs. And this was born of his own lived experience with his 17-year-old now, who's living with cerebral palsy. But I'll turn it over to Jeff, and Jeff, I'll let you speak to your own experience and get right into the content that you've so graciously prepared for us today. So thank you so much for your time. And I guess I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. So as Adam had said, my name is Jeffrey Zaldin. I am the father of a daughter with cerebral palsy, so I live the life. I have a financial advisory practice that deals with RDSPs as well as protecting mainly here in Ontario individuals that are on ODSP from getting their ODSP. I understand how difficult it sometimes is in keeping up with the medical and therapy appointments, so I help my clients go through their personal situation, try and determine what the ideal financial position would be for them, and work with them to determine what order and what funds they should be using in order to maximize their finances and minimize tax implications and any government clawbacks that there are.
Sorry, Jeff, I hate to cut you off so early, but I'm not seeing the screen.
Oh.
I don't know if you meant to be sharing it now or not.
I did, but I will. My screen just went black.
Just so everybody knows, we tested this before and it was working. So yeah, we'll blame it on the Zoom gremlins. Yeah. All right. I see it now there, Jeff. So on the introduction slide.
Yeah. So as I said, I was going to talk about the disability tax credit, provide some basic information about special needs financial planning, provide information about how the RDSP works, explain what a Henson Trust is and how it can be used to protect various provincial disability programs and future government assistance through proper financial and estate planning. At any time, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions during the presentation as we go. And if for some reason you're not able to ask any questions, I'm happy to give a free consultation at a different time and answer any questions you have at that time. Okay. So to ensure that you're covering the basics of special needs financial and estate planning, you should review your life and health or pension documentation and any wills and powers of attorney that you may have. You should also consider when to open an RDSP and how best to fund the contributions to the maximum to maximize the amount of. Sorry, can you hold on 1 second? I'm just trying to. Something is really funky in this.
That's all right. Take a minute here. We see a little bit of the notes screen now, just so you're aware.
Yeah, it's my Zoom is crashing, so it's fine.
Okay. If you need to,
no, we're good. All right. So when you're looking at your finances, you should determine if your previous financial plan is still appropriate for the new current situation, both now and for after you have passed. That may include setting up a Henson Trust or another type of trust. We will discuss the Henson Trust later. And to ensure you are planning properly, it is extremely important to have a team of experts that understand how to best plan for individuals with special needs. There are substantial changes to benefits and programs when an individual turns 18, and planning should begin shortly after their 17th birthday. There is also the question of whether or not your child will be able to sign a power of attorney, or if you may require guardianship, and if that's something that you should be considering. So what is an RDSP? Once approved for the DTC, you are potentially able to qualify for this investment vehicle called an RDSP. It is a federal government program that allows you to contribute money into a plan and subsequently receive grants of up to $70,000 lifetime and bonds of up to $20,000 lifetime from the government, which will grow tax-free for future requirements of a person with special needs. To receive the RDSP grants, you must contribute into an RDSP, and the amount of grant entitlement will depend on your net family income. To receive RDSP bonds, however, there is no contribution necessary, although there is an income threshold.
Oh, well, we've lost Jeff there at the most opportune time. So he seems to be having some technical challenges, guys. I apologize. We appreciate everybody's patience here. I think we all know that as we live in the age of Zoom meetings and technology, that's right. RDSPs are too extreme for Zoom. Thank you, Jeff, for highlighting that for us. Give it a minute, guys. We'll get Jeff back here, and maybe his Zoom will start working better at that point. You know what I'm going to do is, while we wait for him, I'm actually going to share the clip of Control Bionics here. So why don't I pull that up? Oh,
Hello.
hey Jeff. I was just I thought that maybe I would fill some time by showing them the clip here, but I don't have to do that if you're ready to
fine. Go ahead, and then you'll let me know when you got interrupted.
All right, guys. So Control Bionics, again, our sponsors. They allow us to do what we're doing here. And they developed a very specialized technology that helped people with speech disabilities to be able to communicate. I'll play this short video here that can explain it better than I can. Please check them out and check out all their wonderful technology. Once we're done here today.
Meet the NeuroNode Trilogy, the latest assistive communication device from Control Bionics. The Trilogy is a Windows-based solution for those living with paralysis and loss of speech due to conditions like cerebral palsy, SMA, TBI, spinal cord injury, or ALS-MND. This device combines 3 access methods: touch control, eye control, and NeuroNode 3.0 control. Putting these access methods together allows for the fastest, most efficient communication speed, while simultaneously reducing user fatigue. Not only does this solution provide a voice for the voiceless, but it also provides environmental control and native computer control. The 3-in-1 solution relieves the pressure of getting the right device for right now and provides a solution for the present and future. As a user's condition changes due to a progressive illness or daily fatigue, the NeuroNode Trilogy can adapt to that person's abilities using their preferred access method. The Trilogy is also backed by our industry-leading customer support. Contact us anytime, day or night, and our team will be there. There are many funding options available for the NeuroNode Trilogy, including funding support through Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, the Veterans Administration, and various departments of education. Visit our website at www.controlbionics.com to learn more, or give us a call at 513-453-4848 to schedule an assessment with your local representative.
I will add to this revolution. I will add to the video that it is also funded in Canada through the Assisted Device Program. And as we are talking about financial planning today, any funding you can get for complex technologies like this is especially relevant. So thanks everybody for watching that. I'll turn it back over. Jeff, are you set to go here?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't you share your screen again, and we'll get back on track. Perfect. What is an RDSP is what we're seeing.
Okay. So the RDSP, I'm not sure where exactly everyone got cut off, so we'll start here. The RDSP is a federal government program. It allows you to contribute money to a plan to subsequently receive up to $70,000 of grants lifetime and bonds of up to $20,000 lifetime from the government, which will grow tax-free for future requirements of a person with special needs. To receive RDSP grants, there must be contributions into an RDSP, and the amount of grant entitlement will depend on your net family income. To receive RDSP bonds, however, there is no contribution necessary, although there is an income threshold that we will discuss later. To qualify for an RDSP, the beneficiary must have been approved for the DTC, be a Canadian resident, hold a valid SIN number, and the account must be opened before the end of the year the individual turns 59. However, grants and bonds are only granted for individuals until the end of the year the individual turns 49. The RDSP is meant as a long-term investment, generally not to be accessed until the individual is at least 39. 30 is at the earliest, but most likely 49 plus years old. That is because any money withdrawn from an RDSP will require any government grants or bonds within the prior 10 years to be repaid to the tune of $3 repayment for each dollar that is withdrawn, up to the total amount that is received in the previous 10 years from the government. If the financial advisor you are working with does not take the time to explain properly the rules around the grants and bonds and the rule about how to withdraw funds from the RDSP, I strongly suggest you find someone else to help you manage your So just by opening an RDSP, you become eligible for the government bond money if the individual has low income. And if you make a contribution, there will be additional government grant money. There's an ability to do a tax-deferred rollover of registered funds of a parent or grandparent, but there are subject to rules, which I will talk about later. There is a maximum lifetime contribution limit of $200,000 into an RDSP, and the contribution limit does not include any grants, bonds, or the increase in investments that you receive. Contributions are non-deductible, but the plan does grow tax-free until money is withdrawn from the RDSP. The net family income that I've discussed earlier and will continue referring to is that the parent's net income when the individual is below the age of 18 or below the age of 19 is that the parent's net income reported on line 236 of their tax returns. If the child is 19 years old or the year they turn 19, the net family income becomes the individual's own net income, them and any spouses they may have. The CRA will actually use the 2-year previous tax return for the calculation. For example, in 2022, they would use your 2020 tax return. Therefore, you must file a nil tax return for your child when they are 17 in order to gain the benefit of when they first turn 19 and the net family income is upon themselves. I want to differentiate. Sorry?
There's a question from in the chat here. Jeff is asking if you have numbers, any of the numbers that you were referring to on the previous slide, I think, written down somewhere that can be shared.
Which numbers?
I'm not entirely sure. I think you were referring to certain limits of contribution or bonds or different values. And
I will get to that later in the presentation.
Perfect.
Okay, so I want to differentiate between bond and grant money. Bond money is granted based upon net family income and does not require any contributions, but is only for low income. For 2022, if your net family income is under $32,797, you'll be eligible for $1,000 of bond money. If the net family income is between $32,797 and $50,197, yes, the government is that particular, you will be eligible for bond money that is based upon a formula and get a portion of that $1,000 of bond for each year. For most of that, that means that the bond money won't be available until the year that your child is turning 19. Grant money, on the other hand, is based upon contribution and made into an RDSP. For 2022, if your net family income is over $100,392, then if you contribute $1,000 into an RDSP, you receive $1,000 of grant money for each entitlement year. If your net family income is actually below the $100,392, then if you contribute $1,500, you will actually receive $3,500 of grant money. This slide is an example of how somebody entitled to a maximum amount of grant money can catch up for previous 10 years, and how in 4 years, with contributions of $21,500, that you could receive government grant money of $50,500 and an additional government bond money of up to $15,000. The slide also shows how complex the calculations can be to figure out the RDSP grant and bond entitlement. For an annual contribution of $1,500, that you would receive the $3,500 grant. That is done by the first $500 receiving triple grant. So $500 gets you $1,500 of grant. The next $1,000 actually gets you $2,000 of grant, and that's how you get to the $3,500. The government will actually give you the highest grant first. So if you had 7 years of $500 that triples, they will actually use that first. Now, the maximum amount of money that you can actually get of grant money in any 1 year is $10,500. So, for example, if you can go back 7 years and get the $500 to triple, any money that you put into the RDSP above $3,500, which would attract $10,500 of grant money, would actually not attract any grant money because it does not carry it forward into the next year. Contributions are only given grant money for the year in which the contribution is made. During 2020 to 2022 to 2026, if you were eligible for the maximum past grant entitlements for the past 10 years, then as I said, you put in $21,500, you get an additional $50,500 in only 4 years. After you're all caught up in 2026, going forward, you would only need an annual contribution of $1,500 and would receive $3,500 of grant money until the year 2032. In 2031, you will actually fully utilize the remaining amount of grant entitlement with a contribution of $750, and that means for contributing $29,750, you will have received the maximum lifetime amount of $70,000 of grant money. In addition to the grant money, dependent upon the net family income, as I explained, you could have received the bond money. That is subject to a lifetime amount of $20,000. So then you could actually have that $20,000 by the year 2031. Please note you can go back to the earlier of 10 years prior to the date of disability. It's either or. And the date of disability is not to be confused with the date of diagnosis. The date of diagnosis is often several years later than the actual date of disability. It is important to know that there are specific rules when withdrawing from an RDSP. Most financial institutions and banks will actually not mention what the withdrawal rules are. As I mentioned earlier, all government monies, both grant and bonds, received in an RDSP have that 10-year hold, and any payments made if grants or bonds are received within the previous 10 years will force the repayment. You do not get to remove contributions and grants that were received longer than 10 years if you have still received government grants or bonds within the previous 10 years. The amount of money that would be subject to the repayment is called the assistance holdback amount. And as I said earlier, the repayment is you must repay $3 for each dollar that is withdrawn. It is important that if a beneficiary qualifies for the DTC, then no longer qualifies for the DTC, then the RDSP no longer needs to be collapsed, which used to be the rule until they passed legislation a few years ago. It will, however, the RDSP will actually need to be held until the individual turns 60 in order not to have any of that grant or bond money clawed back. If the RDSP has more government contributions than private contributions in it, the RDSP is called a PGAP, primarily government assisted plan. Then when you take funds out of it, you will only be able to take a maximum amount of the greater value determined by a CRA formula or 10% of the account, whichever is greater. A one-time withdrawal of funds is called a disability assistance payment, and an ongoing payment is called a lifetime disability assistance payment, which must be started no later than the end of the year the individual turns 60. I have been asked many times if someone has a DTC that is approved for only 5 or 10 years, should they bother opening an RDSP? The answer is typically yes, but it depends on an individual circumstance, and I would be happy to discuss that privately if you wish.
Jeff, there's a question. If you can go back to the numbers slide. There's a question just to confirm. The numbers noted here are specifically for income of less than $100,300. Is that correct?
$100,392. Yes, that's if you were catching up for 10 previous years and had an undervalue. That's the maximum catch up allowed for grant money. If
you've started late is sort of
correct.
Right.
Or like if you just recently got been granted the disability tax credit, it's more than 10 years, then you could go back and do this schedule depending upon your income thresholds.
I see. Okay, thank you.
So there are other ways to contribute into an RDSP as well, such as a rollover of registered money from a deceased parent or grandparent. But the beneficiary must be a financial dependent, and this would actually have to be claimed on your income tax return. Receiving an inheritance is also a possibility, but you must structure that inheritance properly, and it must be done in the will, because doing so after the fact really limits your ability to do proper planning and to maintain a provincial disability program. Rollover of RESPs is something that is also possible. This is only the gain or interest, not the principal of an RESP, and it is not considered as an RDSP contribution for grant money. Also, anyone can contribute into an RDSP as long as they have authorization from the account holder. And any contributions into an RDSP are generally exempt for purposes of a provincial disability program. The RDSP can help cover living expenses later in life, and it works really well with the Henson Trust, which in most provinces has protection from the asset threshold, but not the income threshold of provincial disability programs. One of the most important features of an RDSP beyond the grants of bonds is that payments from an RDSP do not impact most other income-tested provincial and federal government programs, such as provincial disability programs, old age security, GIS, guaranteed income supplement, CPP, GST benefits, or social assistance benefits. A very effective way to protect assets for an individual on a provincial disability program is utilizing what's called a Henson Trust. A Henson Trust is a fancy way of saying an absolute discretionary trust where the beneficiaries of the trust have an interest in the trust property, but the trustee is the legal owner, and therefore the trust is not considered an asset of the disabled individual. The Henson Trust, like an insurance trust, must be set up in a will prior to death and cannot be done by an executor after death. All monies in a Henson Trust will not affect provincial benefits from an asset threshold. However, any money withdrawn from a Henson Trust is subject to asset and income threshold under provincial disability program rules unless used for authorized disability equipment or services. That can include PT, OT, nursing, PSW, and other services and programs as accepted by your provincial disability program. Now we're going to get into some province-specific rules with regards to the provincial disability programs. The main one that I deal with is, for my clients, is ODSP, and some individuals with special needs will actually be eligible for ODSP when they turn 18. ODSP is a program that's managed by the Ontario Ministry of Community and Social Services, and it provides income support to help pay living expenses such as food and housing. It can help provide people with disabilities who can and want to prepare to find a job. There are also potentially significant drug and some basic dental coverage for somebody who has qualified for ODSP. So these are sort of the rules of ODSP that are specific to Ontario, which is up to $10,000 of gifts are exempt, cumulative, so it doesn't matter whether it comes from a segregated fund account, whether it comes from parents, or where that gift is. The maximum you can get in any 12-month period of time is actually $10,000 of gift. The income, any income that you earn while on ODSP above $200 a month will be clawed back 50 cents for every dollar. In order to receive an inheritance not to count as an asset, it would need to be put into a trust, and that trust should be guided by the will, and it has to be an absolute discretionary trust. There is a limit of $100,000 in inheritance trust, and there is no limit in Henson trusts. One of the exempt items of ODSP is something called segregated funds, which are basically an insurance-wrapped mutual fund, and they are exempt up to a maximum amount of $100,000. If the account grows to $100,001, it would actually be offside of ODSP, and it could force a loss of ODSP for that period of time. There's also a way of protecting ODSP benefits greater than $100,000 by having money put into a Henson Trust, or using other exempt assets such as primary residence or primary vehicle. Now in Alberta,
Jeff, I just want to go back to the Ontario. So based on your experience, is there a class of asset that parents generally leave for their children that you see commonly gets overlooked and compromises ODSP availability?
Yes, actually, one of the biggest things that does, and I just had a case of this recently, is somebody that leaves a registered account or a life insurance policy to an individual. You may set up a will properly with the Henson Trust, But if you do a named beneficiary to a person with a disability, it actually passes directly to that individual. It circumvents the Henson Trust created in the will, and therefore would actually cause somebody to lose ODS, potentially lose ODSP, and have issues and have to use up the inheritance before they can get back on ODSP.
Thank you.
So in Alberta, you guys have AISH as opposed to ODSP. The first $1,072 of monthly net employment is exempt. $2,612 if there's a cohabitating partner. Each dollar above the exempt amount, AISH will decrease by 50%. Up to the 2009 for individuals, or $3,349 for cohabitating partners. RDSP and RSP payments are exempt from the income test in Alberta, and locked-in retirement accounts, so former pension money, are exempt from the asset test. Not exempt items cannot exceed $100,000. So whereas in Ontario, the maximum of non-exempt assets can be $40,000, in Alberta it's $100,000. RSP, RIFs, and RESPs, however, are all not exempt assets, and a Henson Trust is an exempt asset for purposes of Alberta. In BC, I don't know if we have anybody now attending from BC, but earnings of $12,000 for single claimants can happen while under PWD, and $14,400 per family with 2 adults, as long as both of the adults are on PWD. RDSPs are exempt from both the asset as well as income threshold, and non-exempt assets cannot exceed $100,000 for an individual, or $200,000 if there is a couple and they both qualify for PWD. Uncashed life insurance with cash surrender value of less than $1,500 are exempt from asset limits, which is substantially different than here in Ontario, which is up to $100,000. But the assets held in a qualifying trust does not have to be a Henson Trust, are exempt from a non-discretionary trust up to $200,000, and there is no limit to the exempt items in an absolute discretionary trust, such as a Henson Trust.
Hey, sorry, Jeff. There was another question that came in here.
Yeah.
So it's specific to inflation being so high, but I think there's a more general question here. They're curious about if income limits for ODSP and perhaps some of these other programs for people in other provinces will be readjusted, and how often they revisit adjusting income thresholds for these programs.
The one in Alberta and BC has been around for several years. Ontario was actually recently changed. It was actually as low as $5,000 for asset threshold. It was only recently moved up from $5,000 to $12,000, from $12,000 to $40,000, and I don't know that that's likely to significantly change from that. It's up to each provincial government each time they get elected. So I'm never ever going to try and hazard a guess, because so many people have promised, and it's died in legislation before the next election even runs. So I can't even hazard a guess as to what might happen in the future, but it is not anything that is generally tied to inflation or make any reason or rhyme.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for addressing that. Did that address the question there? We'll find out. Please continue with your.
All right. So I understand there's at least one person that may be from New Brunswick. So in New Brunswick, you can have income of $500 at fixed amount plus 30% of whatever remainder earnings on provincial disability program. $200 per month is allowed without affecting benefits, and RDSP payments up to $800 a month are exempt from an income test. So this is New Brunswick and Quebec are the two exceptions about limitations regulations as to income payments for RDSPs. Non-exempt assets cannot exceed $10,000 for a household, which is significantly lower than most other provinces, and trust funds up to $200,000, an RSP up to $50,000, and RASPs are all exempt from asset limits. There is no limit to exempt assets in an absolute discretionary trust, such as a Henson trust. Now, in Quebec, the individual income exemption is $200 per month and $300 per month for a couple for a provincial disability program. There is a maximum of $950 a month withdrawal from an RDSP for an adult, which is quite low given the size and the growth of most people's RDSPs. And once again, the non-exempt assets cannot exceed $1,500 for an individual and $2,500 for a family. So you virtually cannot have any assets in the name of the individual with a disability while still qualifying for a provincial disability program. Okay, so I believe it's very important to ensure that you have a team of knowledgeable experts to assist yourself. I'm hoping that you get an idea that there are some very complex decisions that must be made, ones that you may not have even contemplated, and most are beyond the scope of most financial advisors and bank employees, and generally way beyond the person that works at your local branch and doesn't do financial planning as their day job. There are more concepts such as qualified disability trust that will need to be discussed with your financial advisor, and you should have a financial advisor along with a lawyer and accountant who can work together and ensure that you have planned for everything that you should be planning for, and they can help work through the various issues and develop the right kind of individualized plan for you and your family. So at Special Needs Financial, our goal is to make planning for the future of an individual with special needs and the entire family an easier, less complex process. Through the use of government programs such as RDSP and other savings vehicles and life insurance, as well as putting you in touch with individuals who specialize in other areas. We put together a full plan, and we hope to make your financial goals a reality. And here is my contact information, and I am happy to answer any more questions from whatever questions somebody might have, anything somewhat related.
We'll leave this information up on the screen here for a second so that everyone has a chance to copy it down. If there are questions that you'd like to ask, please put them in the chat window now, or you can use the Q&A function on Zoom. We'll wait a couple of minutes to see what gets populated here, and see if there's any additional questions that we can answer before we wrap up. There's a question coming in here, Jeff. Can you speak more about RDSP for children with low life expectancy?
Okay. Yes, I can, and it's a bit of a quagmire to get into, but I'll get into it. There's two different ways to go about this. It depends on the life expectancy of the individual. If you're talking about a few years as opposed to potentially maybe a few decades. So if the individual can provide a little more information, that would be helpful. There is an allowance if there is a reduced life expectancy in an RDSP to be able to take out some money from an RDSP without having to repay back any of the assistance holdback. It has to be certified by a doctor, and there has to be less than 5 years of life expectancy left. It turns into a specified disability savings plan as opposed to a registered disability savings plan. There's no further contributions that are allowed into the plan, but you can take out, I believe, the last legislation I took a look at, the last time I did it a few years ago, it was $10,000 a year each year without having to worry about any of the assistance holdback. So that's one of the things. I noticed there's a couple of questions in the chat, so I don't know if they responded.
Yes, so there's additional context there. The comment was that in this case, it's likely less than a decade, not into childhood or not into adulthood.
So then, the second part of what I was going to say would possibly pertain, which would be that if you start making contributions, especially on a rapid basis, as shown in that example that I gave previously during the seminar, you would be able to contribute a significant amount in the next few years. And every 10 years, that money then gets repatriated as to part of the permanent RBSP. So, for example, if you got $11,000 of bond money this year and $10,500 of grant money, 10 years from now, that $21,500 becomes part of the estate or part of the account at that time, and you can never lose that money. And each year you gain another 10.5 if you make the maximum contributions to get the maximum grant money each year. So if the individual does live, 10, 15, 20 years, you would be able to receive significant government money and retain that. Unfortunately, it might actually involve the individual passing away before you get access to those funds. The RDSP would be considered an asset and part of the estate of the individual with a disability that passed away, and it would follow estate legislation. So, for example, the parents would then potentially get, and I hate the terminology, but it's the only one I can really equate to, they would get compensated for some of the life expenses they had undergone, and be able to use some of that money to offset some of that during that child's lifetime.
Thanks. Let us know if that answered the question or if you need any more clarity. We still have a couple more minutes here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen one more time here, Jeff. And I'm going to, for anyone who joined late, I'm going to just replay this video from our sponsors that discusses what the NeuroNode is and the Trilogy system from Control Bionics. It is a very life-changing technology for those who have significant speech impairments and disabilities. It allows you to regain your voice by use of eye tracking or EMG tracking in order to control the integrated communication system that allows you to speak and in all sorts of settings. So I'm going to play this video one more time, and thank you so much again to Control Bionics for allowing us to put on this webinar series.
Meet the NeuroNode Trilogy, the latest assistive communication device from Control Bionics. The Trilogy is a Windows-based solution for those living with paralysis and loss of speech due to conditions like cerebral palsy, SMA, TBI, spinal cord injury, or ALS-MND. This device combines 3 access methods: touch control, eye control, and NeuroNode 3.0 control. Putting these access methods together allows for the fastest, most efficient communication speed, while simultaneously reducing user fatigue. Not only does this solution provide a voice for the voiceless, but it also provides environmental control and native computer control. The 3-in-1 solution relieves the pressure of getting the right device for right now and provides a solution for the present and future. As a user's condition changes due to a progressive illness or daily fatigue, the NeuroNode Trilogy can adapt to that person's abilities using their preferred access method. The Trilogy is also backed by our industry-leading customer support. Contact us anytime, day or night, and our team will be there. There are many funding options available for the NeuroNode Trilogy, including funding support through Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, the Veterans Administration, and various departments of education. Visit our website at www.controlbionics.com to learn more, or give us a call at 513-453-4848 to schedule an assessment with your local representative.
So aside from being a wonderful technology, they're also a wonderful company to work with, and I've seen nothing but amazing support for all of their clients. I'm just seeing here that there's one more question that made it into the chat window. if you were to contribute heavily into an RDSP with the understanding that the individual can't withdraw before 30, 39 normally, if the disabled person were then to die before or after that point, what can still be withdrawn?
I'm going to see if I actually understand the question. I think what you're asking is if the individual dies earlier than age 30 or 39, what happens? As I said, what happens is the RDSP constitutes part of the estate. So if it does, an example, say the individual passed away at age 27, they had received government money within the last 7 years, any money within the last 10 years, so the money from 7, 8, and 9 years ago would actually have to be repaid. That government money would have to be repaid to the government. The remainder of the money would then be collapsed into the estate and form part of the disabled individual's estate and go to, generally it would be estate law, so parents, siblings, nearest living relative, cousins, et cetera, and so on. There would be some tax money that would be due because you have to pay tax on the growth in an RDSP when it is withdrawn, and you have to pay tax on the grants and bonds that you were able to retain or keep. You would be able to retain any grants or bonds 10 years or older than the individual that from the time at which they passed away. So, for example, any money that they had received from, if they pass away at 27, any money that they received from the government from 17 or earlier, they get to, it constitutes part of the estate and remains part of the estate. So it never has to go back to the government. If it's after the age of 39,
in that sense, do you run a small risk of the money actually being a negative investment where it will not draw interest during that time and you'll repay the funds?
So you only have to repay the government funds, not the funds you put in or anything else. If you put money in, 6 months from now, there's a 15% downtick, and then you have to, your world is collapsing and you need to take the money out. Yes, technically you could potentially lose money, but in reality, most people will be able to hold on to it long enough that it will retain its value. Now, just because it has to be withdrawn from the RDSP doesn't mean that you can't necessarily purchase the same kind of assets outside and wait until they grow back above. That's completely up to you.
Okay. So we still have a few minutes here, and we're happy to, sorry, 1 second, guys. We're happy to stay on the line and answer more questions until 2:00 here, when we need to release Jeff for his daily scheduled work.
And if anyone is shy and would prefer a private conversation, I'm happy to accommodate that too.
Yeah, and so in general, there will be a web recording of this. You'll see an email that will actually come out from Control Bionics with a link to the recording for anyone who wants it. For more information or general questions about living with disability, feel free to check out avika.io. Leave a suggestion, reach out to us through our contact info at avika.io. For any financial planning needs, feel free to reach out to Jeff at the address provided or any of his contact information. And of course, please check out Control Bionics to see what they do and understand more about their technology and how it's changing the world for people with complex speech disabilities. Otherwise, thank you all for your time. We really appreciate you, and we really appreciate you spending an hour with us this afternoon. And thank you so much to Jeff for contributing your time to putting this on. It was such a great information, and I can see in the chat here everyone is commenting how great it was and how much valuable content they're taking away from it. So thank you so much, Jeff, as well. And we'll just wait here. We can stay on for a couple more minutes, or until all of the participants drop off, and we'll wrap it up then.
It is much easier to talk, isn't it?
It is. Welcome to the conversation, Jeff. Thank you for all your great questions.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for the presentation. It was fantastic. I was actually kind of curious, Jeff, are you familiar with any other programs, less so investment programs and more so just general assistance programs for people with disabilities? We have a young child with disabilities, so we're swimming through the quagmire. New Brunswick.
Unfortunately, I'm not that familiar with New Brunswick. You asked me about Ontario. I can list a bunch, but New Brunswick, I unfortunately am not really familiar with.
Yeah, no, we've been relying on our doctors and just sort of individual research to sort that stuff out. So we'll continue down that road.
There's a great resource called PAL, Parents Advocacy Link, on Facebook. It's a group, it's a Facebook group, mainly out of Ontario, but it is Canada-wide. And there's some great information and sort of exchange of, commiseration and experience that might be helpful for you, actually.
Yeah, perfect. I'll take a look at that for sure. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Our pleasure.
All right, Jeff. I mean, I guess we can let you go.
All right.
Yeah, really, really appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for all your time, your expertise here.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks. Take care.